It's late at night, and your dog is staring at you again, not barking, not moving. Just watching you with that quiet, focused look like they're trying to figure something out. If you have a dog, you already know this moment. You're sitting on the couch scrolling through your phone, and when you look up, they're already looking at you. Sometimes it happens while you're eating, sometimes while you're working. And sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and find them quietly watching you from across the room. Most people assume the explanation is simple. They want food, they want attention, maybe they just want to go outside. But scientists who study dog behavior say something much more interesting is happening in that moment. Because when your dog stares at you, their brain is doing something that almost no other animal on Earth does with humans. And it starts with a chemical reaction that links to completely different species together. In 2015, researchers at Asobu University in Japan conducted one of the most famous studies in dog behavior. They invited dog owners and their pets into a room and asked them to interact normally for 30 minutes. The dogs played, explored the room, and stayed close to their owners. But the researchers were paying attention to one specific behavior, eye contact. When the scientists measured hormone levels in both dogs and humans afterward, they found something extraordinary. Both experienced a significant increase in oxytocin. Oxytocin is sometimes called the bonding hormone. It's the same chemical released in a mother's brain when she holds her newborn baby. It creates feelings of trust, safety, and emotional attachment. What shocked researchers wasn't just that dogs experienced an oxytocin increase. The humans experienced the same increase at exactly the same time. The dog's gaze triggered oxytocin in the human. The human's response triggered even more oxytocin in the dog, which made the dog stare longer, which strengthened the bond further. A biological feedback loop happening silently between two species. To make sure this wasn't simply a general mammal behavior, researchers repeated the same experiment with wolves raised by humans. The wolves interacted normally, but they rarely maintained eye contact and the oxytocin loop never activated. In other words, this wasn't something wolves naturally do. It evolved specifically between dogs and humans over thousands of years. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. In the wild, direct staring between animals is usually a threat. Among wolves and many other mammals, prolonged eye contact signals aggression or dominance. That's why dogs at a park often avoid staring directly at unfamiliar dogs, yet with humans, dogs do the opposite. Scientists believe this behavior is one of the key traits that evolved during dog domestication roughly 15,000 years ago. Early wolves began approaching human camps in search of food scraps. The wolves that were less fearful survived better. Eventually, these animals weren't wolves anymore, they were the first dogs. Genetic studies have even found changes in specific regions of dog DNA. In simple terms, dogs were literally shaped by evolution to look at us. But dogs don't stare only because of bonding. Sometimes they're trying to understand you. Researchers found that dogs are remarkably skilled at reading human emotions. They reacted differently to happy and angry human faces. Dogs spent more time examining angry faces and showed subtle signs of stress, such as increased heart rate. When your dog stares at you, they're not just looking at your eyes. They're analyzing your face, your voice, and even your body posture. And sight isn't their only source of information. A dog's sense of smell is up to 100,000 times more sensitive than ours. Humans release subtle chemical signals when our emotional state changes. Stress hormones like cortisol alter our scent in ways we can't detect. In one experiment, researchers collected sweat samples from stressed and calm people. Dogs could distinguish between the two with surprising accuracy. Which means when you've had a difficult day and your dog sits quietly staring at you, they may already know you're stressed. They're reading signals from your scent, your breathing patterns, and your facial expressions all at once. But sometimes the explanation is much simpler. Dogs have learned that staring works. Eye contact often leads to rewards. Behavioral psychologists call this operant conditioning. When a behavior leads to a reward, the brain becomes more likely to repeat it. If your dog once stared at you during dinner and a piece of food fell, their brain recorded that moment very carefully. But there's one more reason, and it reveals something fascinating about how they see us. In studies where dogs were given a puzzle they couldn't solve, most dogs eventually stopped trying. Instead, they looked at the object and then looked back at the human, object to human, object to human. This behavior is called gaze alternation. It looks remarkably similar to how human toddlers ask adults for help before they can speak. Dogs treat humans as cooperative partners. When your dog stares at you, they might literally be asking for help. And sometimes the explanation is even more ancient. Dogs are social animals and often watch each other closely to stay connected. In their mind, you are part of their social group, their family, their pack. Watching you is simply part of staying connected. So the next time you catch your dog staring at you from across the room, remember that several things might be happening. They could be reading your emotions, or their brain might simply be activating a biological bond that has existed for thousands of years. And if you stare back for just a moment, you might trigger the same chemical response scientists discovered in the laboratory. Your oxytocin rises, their oxytocin rises. Two completely different species sharing the same biological signal that says, you belong together. If this changed the way you see your dog stare, leave a comment and tell me when your dog does this the most. In the next video, we'll explore why dogs follow you everywhere you go, even into the bathroom. The answer reveals something surprising.